There is a fear that is older than any ghost story we tell, more personal and more invasive than any tale of a monster lurking in the shadows, and more profoundly and existentially unsettling than any account of a haunted house. It is the fear of the self, but a self that has been twisted, mirrored, duplicated, and made undeniably other. It is the sudden, chilling, and profoundly unnatural experience of seeing yourself in a place where you know you are not. Imagine, for a moment, you are walking down a crowded city street, lost in your own thoughts. You glance across the road, and you see a person who is not just similar to you, but is a perfect, living, breathing facsimile. They are wearing your exact clothes, right down to the scuff mark on your left shoe. They have your specific, idiosyncratic gait, your unique hairstyle, the same way you tilt your head when you're thinking. They are, for all intents and purposes, you. And as you watch, frozen in a state of pure, adrenaline-fueled disbelief, this perfect, impossible double turns its head, and your eyes meet yours for a fleeting, terrifying, and world-shattering instant before it turns and disappears into the anonymous river of the crowd. This is the encounter with the doppelgänger. The word itself is German, a compound of doppel, double, and Gänger, goer or walker. It is a term that perfectly encapsulates the strangeness of the phenomenon. It is not just a look-alike, a trick of the light, or a startling coincidence. A doppelgänger, in the grand tradition of global folklore, is a phantom, a ghostly, identical twin that haunts its living counterpart, its presence a tear in the very fabric of accepted reality. And for centuries, across countless cultures all around the world, the mythology surrounding this encounter has been remarkably consistent and deeply, profoundly grim. To meet your own doppelganger is not a quirky anecdote to be shared at a dinner party. It is an omen, a harbinger of misfortune, of impending illness, and most terrifyingly, of imminent, inescapable death. This is a story about these spectral doubles, these shadow selves that seem to walk the liminal, misty spaces between life and death, between the known world and the great, silent unknown. We will journey back in time to explore one of the most well-documented, thoroughly witnessed, and bizarre cases in the entire history of paranormal research. The strange and tragic tale of Émilie Saguy, a 19th-century French schoolteacher whose doppelganger appeared so frequently and so tangibly in front of her students that it left a trail of terror and professional ruin across the face of Europe. We will examine the historical accounts of famous and powerful figures, from poets and queens to presidents and emperors, who claim to have been confronted by their own spectral twins, often just moments or days before their untimely deaths. And we will explore the modern-day accounts, the stories that now proliferate on the internet, and the desperate attempts of science to explain this deeply personal, deeply persistent, and deeply human fear. Are doppelgangers a genuine supernatural phenomenon, a true fetch or wraith, sent as a warning from the other side? A crack in the veil that separates our world from the next? Are they a complex psychological projection, an externalized hallucination born of stress, anxiety, or a hidden neurological disorder? Or are they something else entirely, something stranger still, a glitch in the very code of reality itself? Today, we will step through the looking glass. We will confront the mirror, and we will explore the terrifying, ancient, and unsolved mystery of what, or who, looks back. Let us begin our investigation in the year 1845, in the historical region of Livonia, a territory that is now part of modern-day Latvia and Estonia. We find ourselves at the Pensionat von Nuelka, an exclusive and highly respected finishing school for the daughters of the local Baltic German nobility. It was a place of strict discipline, of high society, of rational Enlightenment-era thinking, and of Protestant piety. It was the last place on earth one would expect to become the epicenter of a prolonged and deeply strange paranormal event. But in that year, This bastion of aristocratic decorum became the setting for one of an astonishing and thoroughly witnessed haunting. The source of this strangeness was not a ghost in the traditional sense, but a new teacher, a 32-year-old French woman of gentle demeanor and excellent reputation, named Émilie Saguy. Émilie was, by all accounts from both the students and the administration, an excellent and beloved teacher. She was bright, engaging, patient, and highly competent in her subjects, which included French and geography. She was physically described as being of average height, with dark brown hair, kind blue eyes, and a gentle, if slightly melancholic, personality. She was, in every respect, a perfect hire. But Émilie Saguy carried with her a secret, a strange and unwelcome affliction that had followed her throughout her adult life, sabotaging her career at every turn. She had a companion, one that was completely invisible to her, but terrifyingly visible to everyone else around her. Émilie Saguy had a doppelgänger. The detailed story of what transpired at the pensionnat von Nulka comes to us primarily from a single, credible, and highly detailed source. One of Emilie's former students, a noblewoman named Julie von Guldenstub. Many years later, as an adult, Julie recounted the strange and unsettling events of 1845 and 1846 to the respected Russian diplomat and spiritualist author, Alexander Aksakov. Aksakov, known for his meticulous and sober approach to paranormal research, published her detailed testimony in his 1875 book, Animism and Spiritism. It is this account that has preserved the case for history. According to Julie von Guldenstub, the strange phenomena began subtly, just a few weeks after Mademoiselle Saguy arrived at the school. The first manifestation occurred in the middle of a lesson, in a classroom filled with 13 students. While the real Émilie was at the front of the class, writing a lesson on the blackboard, her back to the students, they suddenly saw a second Émilie Saguy appear beside her. This double was a perfect, silent, and solid-looking replica. It would mimic her exact movements, but like a shadow that had gained three-dimensional form. If Émilie picked up a piece of chalk, the double would perform the same gesture, but with no chalk in its phantom hand. If Émilie wrote on the board, the double would trace the same letters in the air beside her. At first, the students were confused, rubbing their eyes, assuming it was a strange trick of the light or a shared, momentary illusion. But it kept happening, and it was witnessed not just by one or two girls, but consistently by the entire classroom at once. The doppelganger was not confined to the classroom. It soon began to appear all over the school, at all times of day. A student might be walking down a long hallway and see Mademoiselle Saguy approaching from the far end. But then, they would turn a corner and run into the real Émilie Saguy, who would be coming from a completely different part of the building. The double would be seen sitting in a chair in the common room, seemingly observing the students, while the real Émilie was known to be outside, tending to the school's garden. On another occasion, several students saw the doppelganger standing behind Émilie as she ate her meal in the dining hall, silently and creepily mimicking her every movement as she lifted a fork to her mouth. The nature of the doppelganger, according to the witness testimonies, was strange and inconsistent. Sometimes it was a perfect, solid-looking replica, indistinguishable from the real woman. At other times, it was hazy, translucent, and ethereal, as if it were made of smoke or mist. But it was always silent. It never spoke a word. It never seemed to acknowledge the people who were staring at it in a mixture of terror and fascination. And strangest of all, Émilie Saguy herself was never, ever aware of its presence. She could not see her own double. However, she did seem to be physically and psychically affected by its appearances. The students began to notice a disturbing correlation. Whenever the doppelganger would appear and seem solid and distinct, the real Émilie, wherever she was, would become pale, lethargic, and weak. Her movements would become slow and tired. Her speech would become confused and halting. It was as if the phantom was drawing its energy, its very substance, its life force, from its living host. Her vitality seemed to drain away whenever the double manifested, and would only return when it had vanished. The most famous, most dramatic, and most thoroughly witnessed incident in the entire saga occurred in the summer of 1846. It took place in the main hall of the school, a large, sunlit room with long work tables and large glass doors that looked out onto the school's garden. The entire student body, all 42 girls, were gathered in the hall for their afternoon lesson in sewing and embroidery. Their teacher for this class was not Emily Sagui, but another mistress. The real Emily Sagui was outside in the garden, clearly visible to all 42 girls through the large glass doors. She was weeding a flower bed, her back to the schoolhouse. The sewing mistress left the room for a moment to go and speak to another member of the staff in an adjoining office. Her large, upholstered armchair, at the head of the long table, was now empty. And then, as the 42 girls sat silently working on their embroidery, they watched in stunned, collective silence as the doppelganger of Emily Sagui slowly, gradually, materialized in the empty chair, while the real, physical Emily was still clearly visible outside in the garden. Tending to the flowers, her perfect, silent, and solid-looking double was now sitting in the teacher's chair, calmly and serenely observing them. The girls were frozen, a mixture of profound terror and morbid, scientific curiosity holding them in their seats. According to Julie von Guldenstub's account, 2 of the bravest and most senior students decided to approach the apparition to test its reality. They walked up to the armchair where the phantom teacher sat. They reached out to touch her. Their hands, they later reported, did not pass through the figure as if it were a simple ghost or a hologram. Instead, they felt a strange, resistant, and tangible texture, which they described as being like thick, cold muslin fabric or a dense cobweb. One of the girls, in an act of incredible bravery, was even bold enough to try and walk through the seated figure. She reported that she was able to pass through the apparition, but again, she described a strange, tangible physical resistance, a feeling of moving through something thick, heavy, and clinging. As this was happening, the girls who were still watching the real Emily Sagui in the garden saw her suddenly stoop over, as if overcome by a wave of profound exhaustion and faintness. She had to be helped to a bench by the school's gardener. The doppelganger remained seated in the chair for some time, its movements described as slow and languid, before it slowly, gradually, faded away into nothing, leaving the armchair empty once more. The constant, unpredictable, and terrifying appearances of this phantom began to take a severe toll on the school's atmosphere. The students were perpetually frightened and on edge. The story of the haunted teacher spread. Parents became deeply concerned, hearing these strange and consistent stories from their daughters. Whispers and rumors began to circulate among the staff and the local community. Was Mademoiselle Sagui a witch? Was she possessed by a demon? Was she some kind of monster? The school's administration, despite valuing her as a brilliant and effective teacher, was faced with a growing and untenable crisis. Parents, fearing for the psychological well-being, and perhaps the immortal souls of their daughters, began to withdraw them from the school. The enrollment dwindled from 42 students down to just 12. Finally, the headmistress, her school on the brink of financial ruin, had no choice. She had to have a difficult and painful conversation with Emily Sagui and terminate her employment. During their final meeting, Emily reportedly sighed with a deep, weary sadness and a profound sense of resignation. "Ah," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of a lifetime of this strangeness. "This is the 19th time. It was revealed that this strange, paranormal affliction had followed her entire adult life. She had been hired and subsequently fired from 18 different positions as a teacher, as a governess over the previous 16 years, all for the exact same reason: her terrifying, silent, and unwelcome companion. She was, it seemed, a brilliant and dedicated educator, haunted by a phenomenon that was completely beyond her control and, most tragically, entirely beyond her own perception. Her story, for the historical record, ends there. We do not know what became of the gentle and haunted Emily Sagi after she left the pensionate von Newelke. She, and her phantom twin, simply walked out of the historical record and into the realm of legend. The case of Emily Sagi is one of the most compelling and perplexing in the entire annals of paranormal research. It is not a fleeting glimpse by a single, unreliable witness in the dark. It is a prolonged series of complex events, witnessed by dozens of people, independently and collectively, over a period of more than a year. The detailed, consistent, and sober testimony from Julie von Guldenstub and her 41 classmates makes it incredibly difficult to dismiss as a simple case of mass hysteria or a shared childhood delusion. It remains a profound and deeply unsettling mystery. What was this thing that followed Emily Sagi? What was its nature? What was its purpose? The historical record, both ancient and modern, is filled with other, more famous, but often less detailed, accounts of doppelganger encounters, particularly as they relate to omens of death. This specific type of doppelganger is often referred to by other names in regional folklore. It is known as a fetch in Irish tradition, a wraith in Scottish lore, or a vartiger in Scandinavian folklore. It is a spectral double whose appearance is believed to foretell the imminent death of the person it mimics. It is, in essence, a living ghost. One of the most famous literary accounts of such an encounter comes from the great German writer, poet, and statesman Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. In his autobiography, Dichtung und die Wahrheit, Poetry and Truth, Goethe describes a strange and powerful experience he had as a young man. He was riding on horseback on a road to the town of Drusenheim to visit a young woman he was in love with, Frederica. He was in a state of great emotional turmoil, his mind in a dreamlike state. Suddenly he saw a figure, also on horseback, coming towards him on the same road. As the figure drew closer, Goethe realized with a profound shock that it was himself. The figure was a perfect replica of him, but it was wearing a different suit of clothes than the one he had on, a gray suit trimmed with gold. The apparition looked at him calmly, its expression serene, and then vanished. Goethe, shaken to his core, tried to put the incident out of his mind, dismissing it as a waking dream. 8 years later, he found himself riding on that very same road, once again on his way to visit Frederica. And as he rode, he happened to look down at his own clothes, and he realized with a start that he was, at that very moment, wearing the exact same gray suit trimmed with gold that he had seen on his doppelganger 8 years earlier. For Goethe, it was not an omen of death, but a strange, precognitive out-of-body experience, a moment where his future self seemed to bleed through the fabric of time into his present. The English Romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, a man known for his vivid imagination, his revolutionary politics, and his tumultuous personal life, also reported a chilling encounter with his own double. Shortly before his death by drowning in the Gulf of La Spezia in 1822, Shelley confided in his wife, Mary Shelley, the celebrated author of Frankenstein. He told her that he had been walking on the terrace of their Italian villa when he was suddenly confronted by his own doppelganger. The figure, a perfect mirror image of him, simply looked at him and asked a single, cryptic question. "How long do you mean to be content?" Before it glided away and disappeared. The encounter filled Shelley with a sense of profound, unshakable dread. Just a few weeks later, his boat, the Don Juan, was caught in a sudden violent storm, and he and his companions were drowned. Perhaps the most famous American doppelganger story is that of President Abraham Lincoln, a man known to be deeply superstitious, melancholic, and prone to prophetic dreams and a powerful sense of fatalism. According to his close friend and bodyguard, Ward Hill Lamon, who published a biography of Lincoln after his death, a strange event occurred on the night of his first election in 1860. An exhausted Lincoln went home and lay down on a sofa to rest. He glanced across the room at a large mirror that hung on the wall and saw his own reflection. But he didn't just see one reflection, he saw two. There was his own normal, familiar reflection, and beside it, a second identical face, but it was pale, ghostly, and death-like, a spectral shadow of his own visage. He was startled and got up, and the double image vanished. He lay down again, and it reappeared just as before. He was so troubled by the vision that he told his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, about the strange phenomenon. She, being equally, if not more, superstitious, was deeply disturbed and immediately interpreted it as a powerful sign from the spirit world. She believed it meant that he would be elected to a first term and would survive it, which his normal, healthy reflection represented. But the pale, ghostly second face meant that he would be elected to a second term, but that he would not live to see it end. As history knows all too well, her interpretation was tragically and precisely accurate. Lincoln was assassinated just a month into his second term in April of 1865. These stories, from the incredibly detailed and multi-witness case of Emily Sagée to the more anecdotal, personal accounts of famous historical figures, paint a consistent and deeply unnerving picture. But what are we actually dealing with here? What is a doppelganger in its essence? Let's explore the wide spectrum of possible explanations, from the coolly rational and scientific to the deeply strange and supernatural. The most rational and scientifically grounded explanations for doppelganger experiences are, not surprisingly, rooted in the fields of neurology and psychology. The human brain is an incredibly complex, powerful, and sometimes stunningly unreliable organ. And there are several known, albeit rare, conditions that could produce the powerful and convincingly real hallucination of seeing one's own double. One such condition is called heutoscopy, from the Greek for seeing oneself. Heutoscopy is a rare neurological phenomenon where a person experiences the powerful sensation of seeing their own body at a distance. It is not just a visual hallucination, it is a multisensory experience. It can be caused by a variety of neurological issues, including epilepsy, particularly in the temporal lobe, schizophrenia, and physical damage or lesions in a specific part of the brain called the temporoparietal junction. This region is crucial for integrating our sensory information, our sight, our touch, our sense of balance, and creating our stable sense of self in space. When this area malfunctions, our sense of self can become unglued. A person experiencing heutoscopy doesn't just see a double. They often feel a confusing, vertigo-inducing sense of disembodiment, as if their own consciousness is flickering back and forth between their physical body and the location of their hallucinatory double. A related but distinct phenomenon is autoscopic hallucination. This is a purely visual hallucination of seeing one's own body, but without the accompanying sense of disembodiment or confusion of self. The person knows with certainty that they are in their own body, but they see a phantom replica of themselves in the room. This, too, is linked to neurological disturbances and is considered a form of complex visual hallucination. It is entirely plausible that some of the famous historical accounts, like those of Shelley, Goethe, or Lincoln, could be explained by these phenomena. These were individuals living under immense psychological and emotional stress, which is a known trigger for a wide range of psychological and neurological events. Lincoln's vision in the mirror could have been a simple optical illusion, a trick of the light and the glass, combined with an exhausted, sleep-deprived, and profoundly stressed mind playing tricks on itself. But what about the case of Emily Sagée? The neurological explanation, as elegant as it is for subjective experiences, begins to break down completely here. Cutoscopy and otoscopic hallucinations are, by their very definition, subjective, personal, internal experiences. The hallucination is in the mind of the person experiencing the condition. But in Emily's case, she was the one person who couldn't see the doppelganger. It was seen objectively and collectively by dozens of other people, often at the same time. This is not a case of a personal hallucination. This is a case of what paranormal researchers would call an objective, physical manifestation. The doppelganger had an external, verifiable reality, independent of any single person's mind. It could be seen by an entire classroom of students. It could be physically interacted with, touched, and passed through. This takes it out of the realm of simple brain science and pushes it into something far stranger, something that requires a different kind of explanation. This leads us to the more esoteric and supernatural explanations, the ones found in folklore and occult traditions. In these belief systems, the doppelganger is often seen not as a hallucination, but as a spiritual or astral double. This is the ancient idea that the human being is not just a physical body, but is a composite being composed of multiple subtle energetic bodies, an etheric body that acts as a blueprint for the physical and astral body that is the seat of our emotions, a mental body for our thoughts, and so on. In this framework, a doppelganger is the result of a temporary and partial separation of one of these subtle bodies, usually the astral body, from the physical form. The astral body, which is a perfect, energetic replica of the physical one, might project outwards from the body. This can happen intentionally in the case of a trained occultist or an adept practitioner of astral projection, or, more commonly, unintentionally, due to severe illness, extreme emotional trauma, or a physical or psychological weakness in the energetic connection between the bodies. This theory fits the strange and specific details of the Emily Segui case remarkably well. The reports that she would become weak, tired, and pale when the doppelganger appeared could be interpreted as her life force, her vital energy, her prana, being literally drained away to give the astral projection its temporary, semi-physical substance. The phantom's mimicry of her actions could be seen as the result of the still existing, sympathetic connection between the two bodies, the astral body unconsciously and automatically aping the movements of the physical. The strange, resistant, fabric-like texture that the students felt when they touched it could be a classic description of the tactile sensation of interacting with ectoplasm, the semi-physical, quasi-biological substance that spiritualists and mediums of the era believed ghosts and other spiritual entities were made of. This explanation, of course, requires us to accept a worldview that includes astral bodies, ectoplasm, and the existence of realms beyond our normal sensory perception. For the modern, scientifically minded individual, this is a non-starter. But for those who have studied the vast literature of paranormal phenomena, the astral doppelganger theory provides a surprisingly coherent and internally consistent framework for understanding the bizarre and otherwise inexplicable details of the Segui case. There is another related supernatural explanation, one that is more deeply rooted in folk magic and omens: the idea of the fetch or wraith. This is the belief that the doppelganger is not a part of the person themselves, but is a separate, external entity, a spirit that takes on their form and is sent as an omen or a messenger. In this deeply ingrained folklore, seeing the fetch of a living person is a sure and certain sign that their death is imminent. The fetch is, in essence, the ghost of a person appearing before they have actually died, a kind of spiritual preview of their own demise, a harbinger from the land of the dead. This belief was incredibly common in many parts of Northern Europe, particularly in Ireland, Scotland, and Scandinavia. It was believed that the time of day the fetch was seen was deeply significant. If it was seen in the morning, it was a sign that the person would live a long and healthy life. But if it was seen in the evening or at night, it meant that their death was close at hand. This tradition neatly explains the stories of famous figures like Percy Bysshe Shelley and Abraham Lincoln. They saw their doubles, and shortly thereafter they died. The doppelganger was a harbinger, a supernatural messenger delivering a fatal warning. But what about the modern world? Do people still report seeing doppelgangers? The answer is a resounding and emphatic yes. The internet is filled with modern accounts that are just as strange, and often more difficult to explain, than their historical counterparts. But the nature of the stories has shifted slightly. With the advent of ubiquitous photography and digital communication, the doppelganger phenomenon has taken on a new, technological, and often more viral flavor. There are countless stories online, shared on social media and forums, of people taking photographs and later discovering a perfect, unexplainable double of themselves or a family member lurking in the background of the shot. A family takes a group photo at a wedding, and months later, when looking at it on their computer, they notice that the bride's deceased grandfather appears to be standing in the crowd behind them, looking younger and healthier than he had in years. A woman takes a selfie in her bedroom and later sees the clear reflection of a second, identical face looking back at her from a darkened window in the background, a face that was not there when she took the picture. Are these simple tricks of light and shadow cases of pareidolia where our pattern-seeking brains create familiar faces out of random data? Or are they something more, a momentary bleed-through from another time or another reality? The modern doppelganger has also become inextricably intertwined with another, related and deeply modern phenomenon, the glitch in the matrix. As we have explored in other discussions, these are moments where reality itself seems to stutter, to lag, or to repeat. And doppelganger encounters are a key and recurring part of this modern mythology. The story of seeing an identical car with an identical driver on the highway is a perfect example of this. This is less like a traditional fetch or wraith, and more like a computer rendering error, a duplicated asset in a simulated reality. In this framework, a doppelganger isn't a ghost or an omen. It's a bug in the code of the universe. It's evidence that our reality is not a fundamental, solid thing, but a constructed illusion that is prone to occasional and very strange errors. This simulation theory explanation is deeply appealing to a modern, tech-savvy, and often secular audience. It replaces old-world superstition with a new, digital kind of superstition. It provides a quasi-scientific sounding framework for experiences that defy conventional science. And it neatly explains the objective nature of some of these sightings. The two identical cars on the highway were not a shared hallucination. They were a real, external event caused by a flaw in the simulation's programming. So we are left with a vast and fascinating spectrum of possibilities, from the deeply personal and neurological to the profoundly metaphysical and cosmic. At one end, we have the scientific explanation. Doppelgangers are a product of the fallible human brain, a fascinating but ultimately subjective trick of perception, memory, and consciousness, often triggered by stress, illness, or specific neurological abnormalities. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the rich and varied supernatural explanations. They are astral projections, they are ghostly fetches sent as omens of death, they are tangible proof of a spiritual realm that coexists with, and sometimes intrudes upon, our own. And in the middle, we have the strange, hybrid world of the simulation hypothesis, which suggests that the experience is both real and an illusion at the same time, an objectively real event occurring within a fundamentally artificial and programmed reality. The truth is, we do not know. The doppelganger phenomenon remains one of the most enduring, personal, and profoundly unsolvable mysteries of the human experience. It is a mystery that touches upon our deepest and most primal anxieties. Our fear of death, our uncertainty about the nature of our own identity and our own uniqueness, and our creeping, persistent suspicion that the world around us is not as solid, as stable, and as real as it appears to be. The stories of Emily Sagée, of Lincoln, of Goethe, and the countless anonymous stories shared in the digital ether all serve as powerful and chilling reminders of this fundamental uncertainty. They are cracks in the mundane, predictable facade of everyday life. They are moments that force us to confront the possibility that we are not alone in our own skins, that there may be another, silent and unknown version of ourselves walking the world, a shadow that we can never see, but that, for a fleeting, terrifying moment, others can. To see a stranger on the street who looks a little like you is a common and often amusing curiosity. To see a person who could be your identical twin is a rare and startling coincidence. But to see yourself, a perfect, living, breathing copy, in a place where you know with absolute certainty that you are not, is to come face to face with the profound and terrifying fragility of your own reality. It is a mystery that looks back at you with your own eyes. And the question it asks, in its profound and unnerving silence, is the oldest and most fundamental one of all. Who or what are you really? If this exploration into the unsettling and mirrored world of the doppelganger has captured your imagination, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the enduring mysteries of history, the paranormal, and the strange depths of the human mind. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. And now I turn the final question to you. What do you believe? Have you ever had an experience with what you thought might be a doppelganger, either your own or someone else's? Share your stories and your theories in the comments below. The search for answers in these deeply personal mysteries is a collective one, and sometimes the most profound insights come from sharing our own impossible experiences. Let's explore this strange, mirrored world together, because sometimes the most terrifying monster is the one that wears your own face.